Podcast, a place where opinions aren't right or wrong, and where we can agree or disagree about movies, TV, and other assorted media because it's all subjective. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me. It is one of those Tuesdays where it feels like it should be Wednesday. Like it should be later in the week, right? Doesn't feel like that. Fantastic weather today here. Like schizophrenic weather, which is like the order of the day here in Michigan because like one week it'll be frost advisories at, 3, 4 in the morning. And then the next week you'll have a day like today where it's 80 degrees right now as I'm recording this in the evening. I should probably be in bed right now because I got to work in the morning. But either way, I wanted to record this episode really quickly. I am right now, I got to be honest with you. At the moment, like I was trying to figure out like exactly what to talk about today. And I've got some things that I definitely want to rant a little bit about today. But right now, I'm in awe of this Superman marketing. I mean, DC Studios. I talked about this the other day, yesterday. I talked about it on Flight Chat the other day, and also yesterday on Patreon. DC Studios. I have to give them a round of applause so far for their marketing approach to Superman. I have no idea if this is going to work. I don't know if all of these spots and all these clips and all these posters and getting the word out, this early. And I know it's not necessarily early, right? Like from our purposes, like, wait a minute, there's less than a month, there's less than 2 months, like we're about a month and a half, almost we're a week, a month and 1 week away. What the hell? Get my time straight. A month and a week away from the release of Superman on July 11th. So no, this is kind of 11th hour from our perspective, but still, I mean, think about where we came from with respect to DCEU marketing and what DC Films used to do, right? Especially in the Walter Hamada era. Damn near next to nothing. Seriously, like a smattering of trailers, a little bit of interviews here and some press tours there. Nothing. Nothing compared to this. This isn't even necessarily anything special what DC Studios is doing for Superman with the toy commercials and the cross promotion with the NBA and the behind the scenes clips of Corrin Sweat in the Superman outfit high fiving kids like as Superman, right? That type of thing. And now these posters, that's what happened today. James Gunn's posted on Threads and probably elsewhere in social media a series of character posters for the movie. And not only did he post and he's got some good engagement on this as well because he posted an array of them and said, "Our metahumans arrived this summer in Superman, only in theaters July 11th." And you've got Superman Corrin Sweat, which I know some people don't like this pose where he's got his arms crossed. Whatever. I'm not in the nitpicking phase. I don't nitpick like that. I don't nitpick like that. Not on something like that. I think is that Superman? Yes, that's clearly Superman. All right, fine. So you got him. You got Crypto. Gave him his own poster. You've got Robot Number 4, Superman Robot Number 4. That's Alan Tudyk's character, which the Sub-Saharan Prime, sunlight scene that are all, we're agog about like some weeks ago. You've got an official Guy Gardner with that bowler haircut, and Nathan Fillion looking like he does, like you would expect him to look as Guy Gardner. I saw somebody already enamored, like I'm gonna need that poster on my wall. Clearly a huge Guy Gardner fan. Mr. Terrific's got his own poster. He lit that now. That one looks badass. Edie Gathegi. This is gonna be like the resurrection, or like not the resurrection, but like the redemption for Edie Gathegi, right? And not that he necessarily needed it, but those of us that are still pissed off about how Darwin died in First Class, this is going to be Edie Gathegi's comic book redemption, isn't it? Isn't it going to be Mr. Terrific? Come on, maybe we're looking forward to that. But his poster's badass. Isabella Merced's poster. Here's my thing about Isabella Merced. She still looks like a kid, right? Like she still looks really young. I can't wait to see like in full action, but like she just looks younger than I would personally expect Hawk Girl to look. But whatever. It is what it is. The costume's awesome, right? And the poster is good. It'll be interesting to see how she is in the film. But yeah, all these character posters, and somebody asked Gunn a question about whether or not they were all metahumans because what was let me get the exact question that they asked him because he's active on social media, and I absolutely applaud him for the constructive, like talking to the constructive fans, having the constructive conversations on social media with respect to people that ask legitimate questions like this one. Shade Hendricks asked him, "Isn't the only person who is a metahuman is Hawk Girl? Superman and Crypto aren't human. 4 is a robot. Mr. Terrific is just super smart. Guy's power comes from a tool." And Gunn responded to this. He answered with a quotation. He says, "In DC Comics, a metahuman is a human-like being with extraordinary, often paranormal abilities. These powers can arise from a variety of sources, including science, magic, alien origins, mutation, divinity, proficiency, or technology. Therefore, 4 is probably not a metahuman, but Terrific arguably is. Crypto is meta, but I won't say he's not human because he might read this." So he even poked a little fun at it. But James Gunn, and one of the things that I've always applauded him for so far from the beginning of this is his connection to the source material, right? Like he went and grabbed what I assume is the metahuman definition from like the DC dictionary, or maybe what is that metahuman book or whatnot. I know Jared, some of you, Jared, Phil, Anthony, one of you's probably read that metahuman book. Wally, you've probably read it as well. My DC fans, my diehard DC fans, which is most of you that listen to this show, I'm sure you've read it. I have not read it yet. Scott, if you're listening to this, I know you read it. But either way, like this, it seemed like he pulled the definition from the book, and there were so many others that were like, it's just a genuine, like it's just a standard DC term. Yeah, like mutant, right? But actually even more generic, I guess, in the DC world than mutant is, because at least in the Marvel world, like there's more specificity, right? Like there's mutants, there's Inhumans, right? There's gods as well, like the Asgardians and stuff like that. There's like some more specific terms, and not that there aren't more specific terms, obviously, in DC lore for what everybody is, but it seems like metahuman is the catch-all phrase for people with powers, or like it says, a human-like being with extraordinary, often paranormal abilities from a variety of sources. That's cool. I like how he responded to that particular question. But yeah, I have to applaud DC Studios, James Gunn and Peter Safran for the marketing approach here. Like this is strong. And then the one that he just popped up with, like he posted all 4 of those, or a bunch, all that group of images, that group of posters, like character posters, in it, like by themselves, like in a grouping. And then he just recently, like 30 minutes ago, posted the Metamorpho poster. It says, "Can't wait for you to see Kerrigan again," which is Anthony Kerrigan's Instagram account. "Can't wait for you to see him haunted Rex Mason this July 11th in #Superman." And this is the most unrecognizable I've ever seen Anthony Kerrigan in anything. I mean, other than him being bald, right? Like this does not look like Zaz from Gotham. This does not look like the Mist from The Flash on the Arrowverse, those are the other two DC roles that Anthony Kerrigan has played on screen, right? He's a DC legacy at this point. Like this looks awesome, right? These practical makeup effects, which according to James Gunn comes from legacy effects. Like this is fantastic. Like this looks really good. And as we get closer and closer to July 11th, like I said, my cautious optimism does rise. I like what I'm seeing so far. And I know I'm going to like this movie. I know I'm going to enjoy it, as I've said many times already. It's just a question of how much I'm going to enjoy it. And we will see if this marketing really does do the trick. Like if this really does work out, if this really does provide the desired effect that DC Studios and Warner Brothers Discovery is looking for. Here's hoping, fingers crossed, because definitely hoping for the success of Superman, and a good start, a strong start to the DCU for James Gunn and Peter Safran. But that's what I'm looking at the moment right now. So that's how I start this particular episode. Before going any further, of course, I want to remind anybody that is listening to this show for the first time that you can find this show and my other shows at theflightcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts, which that includes Apple Podcasts, that includes the Flightcast YouTube channel, that includes Spotify, that includes Pandora, or wherever you get your podcasts, whatever podcatcher you might use. You can find the Flightcast show and my other shows. This is the main show, which is now on Tuesdays. On Thursdays, it will be episodes of Flightbox, but right now it's probably just going to be episodes of anything. Like I haven't totally figured that out yet, and the reason for this particular Thursday, that is, and that's because I want to do a catch up of MCU shows, all the MCU shows I haven't watched, but I haven't gotten a chance to start it yet. Schedules, have been topsy-turvy. Didn't really get a chance to jumpstart it this past weekend. Hopefully this upcoming weekend I can, because I need to see, I want to rewatch Hawkeye, and I want to see Echo, and I need to see She-Hulk, and I need to see Agatha All Along, and I know I don't need to see these in preparation for Ironheart, but I kind of am using Ironheart as an excuse to do it. Now, Ironheart for certain, when that premieres on June 24th, I will be reviewing that. So stay tuned for that in a couple of weeks. There will be episodes of Flightbox on Thursdays for that particular show. And I think they're going to do the 3 episode release in successive weeks. So, because it's 6 episodes total, if I'm not mistaken. And so, yeah, we're definitely going to cover that. Definitely going to talk about Ironheart. Ironheart absolutely deserves some discussion, no doubt about that. So stay tuned for that on Flightbox. And then we'll go from there as far as other TV shows to cover, or anything else, whether it decides to be a flight review episode or whether it decides to be flight report. Maybe if I can get back into reading comics. Jared gave me a great tip with respect to some new additions to DC Universe Infinite's subscription options. And so I've got to look into that, among other things, and, get back into reading comics, because there's definitely some comics I need to read before seeing Superman on July 11th. And those episodes of Flight Report, I will probably post on patreon.com/theflightcast. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll post them topside. I haven't figured that out yet. But there are a lot of other comics that I do need to read and review for patreon.com/theflightcast, because I've already read Civil War. I read all 97 issues and tie-ins of Civil War, including the death of Captain America. I've read Spider-Man One New Day or One More Day and Brand New Day, pardon me. So I've already read that. I've already read that in preparation for the Brand New Day movie. Maybe I'll reread it. I don't know. I know a lot of people don't necessarily care for that one. It is what it is. I've also read Death in the Family, because I wanted to read that for the first time before. I've read Zero Year. I've read Scott Snyder's Batman run as well. And these are all episodes of Flight Report that are available at patreon.com/theflightcast, along with a bunch of other bonus content, extra episodes of Flight Review for movies, Flight Box for TV series. There's actually a good amount of bonus content that is there on Patreon. And I'm adding more. Like I said, I just did a Flight Speed episode yesterday where I talked about the DC Studios marketing and, this whole fan approach in terms of Superman and Fantastic Four both coming out in July, and how it, just my thoughts on how it's not a damn rivalry and we can both eat well in the month of July, and hopefully we do as Marvel and DC fans, right? Whichever one we have a preference to see. I will certainly be one that sees both of them, and I think many of you listening to this show will also see both of them. But yeah, I had some thoughts on that as well. Plenty of other episodes of Flight Speed and other bonus content that is available at patreon.com/theflightcast. If you are a flight officer, you can sign up there and get access to all of that, and also get access to the bonus content that is coming forth, including some more movies that I have not watched yet that you surely have, that I'm going to be giving my thoughts on. Some special stuff upcoming here. So thank you so much for those of you very loyal subscribers at patreon.com/theflightcast, and thank you to anybody who is interested in subscribing in the not too distant future. So like I said, there were a couple of things that I wanted to rant about this particular week, and the first one has to do with Superman and Fantastic Four, and in particular, this whole thing with these box office projections and these test screenings that allegedly have happened. And, first off, I'm test screenings, I don't give a shit about test screenings. Unless I'm involved in a test screening personally, I don't care. I absolutely do not care. We've been down this road before multiple times with the DCEU, and maybe even a little bit with the MCU as well. But why do we give a shit about test screenings? Who cares? Remember when they called Wonder Woman unwatchable, right? Remember when that report came out way back when, in the midst of the DCEU slander, in the early days when it was making $3 billion through its first 4 movies? Remember that? I know a lot of people love to, go with the revisionist history and act like Zack Snyder's movies weren't making money, but they were, along with David Ayer's, studio cut of Suicide Squad, if you will, the one that was cut by a trailer park. And then, of course, Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman, collective $3 billion made, between those 4 films, right? And even back then, test screenings are like, oh, an executive says it's unwatchable or it's this or it's that, right? There was this whole diatribe about how a crew member, an unnamed crew member, right, if I remember correctly, said that it was terrible, and yet it comes out and it's it's one of the highest rated DCEU films, right? As far as the hell site Rotten Tomatoes is concerned, it had incredible legs, right? It stayed on in theaters through a Transformers film first night and also through Spider-Man: Homecoming for the MCU, right? It did extremely well. It's one of the more successful DC movies released in the last decade, right? And there was a test screening, or there was some executive, somebody that worked on the crew, whoever it was, I forget exactly what it was, that said it was terrible, right? Or the unwatchable version of Zack Snyder's Justice League that never saw the light of day as far as an official theatrical release. And then of course, we see the 4 hour and 2 minute long version, that ended up being released, a number of years too late, but and whatever. Many of us would hardly call that unwatchable. There's still some people out there that would agree with that, but the Rotten Tomatoes, the Hell site, doesn't agree with that because that's actually rated fresh on the Hell site, isn't it? Is it not? Most certainly. But either way, this is why test screenings are bullshit. Because one, can we 100% confirm whether or not they happen? Like, you keep hearing like, okay, so and so was at this test screening. He heard somebody say this, right? And someone's father's brother's nephew's cousin's former roommate of Dark Helmet said this about Superman. And, their brother, who is not related to them whatsoever, said something about Fantastic Four. The cast wasn't developed all that great, but the action was outstanding. Da 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 da. Like, who gives a shit unless you're one of those people that is actually in the test screening? Does not matter, because all that matters is your own subjective appraisal of what it is you see on screen, and you shouldn't need anybody else's test screening nonsense, positive or negative, to sway you. I don't care if the test screenings are like, oh my goodness, Superman is the greatest Superman movie ever made, or Fantastic Four blows all the other Fantastic Four movies out of the water. I don't need other people's opinions to, one, think that myself with respect to Fantastic Four, not necessarily with respect to Superman. But I also, you don't need that to influence your decision. You already know in your gut, as a fan, how you're going to feel about these movies. And this is why I say, people, I've been accused over the years by friends and, acquaintances in real life of liking every movie that I see. And the reality of the situation is that no, there are plenty of movies that I've watched that I don't necessarily care for. But the reality is, I generally, like, when I go to the theater, and I've said this before and I'll reiterate, when I go to the theater, when I choose to purchase a ticket to go to the movie theater, I don't do it for movies that I don't think I'm going to like. I intentionally choose movies that I think I'm going to enjoy. Like, I'm never blindsided. I'm never surprised. I mean, the movie would have to do like a whole lot to really surprise me and be like, wow, that was just nothing that I was expecting and I don't like it, right? Usually when surprises happen in a movie, it's a good surprise. For me, anyway, right? And that's because listen, if you want to call it a wide strike zone, I guess that's your business. But I don't know. I guess I just like being happier with respect to going to see a movie. If I'm paying money, I want to find the silver lining. This is why I wasn't mad at Madam Web. And this is why I own Madam Web in glorious 4K Steelbook, because it was a meh movie that had parts in it that I actually enjoyed, and that's half the reason I own it. The other half of the reason I own it is because so many people hate it, and I literally have it in my collection out of spite for those people, because I like owning something in that regard, like out of spite. Now, somebody could easily go, well, Ray, then how come you don't own Howard the Duck or Son of the Mask? Well, because I don't like those movies. I don't like either one of them. But Madam Web, I can at least watch that and be like, this is hardly the worst comic book movie I've ever seen, and there's actually some parts of it that I actually enjoy. So you know what? I'll go ahead and add it to my library. Or Morbius. I don't have Morbius yet, but I will. I will have Morbius, and I'll have Craven. I will. All of the Sony Spider-Man movies, all the Sony, Spider-Man universe movies that they've done in live action. I have all the Venoms. I have the entire Venom trilogy. I have every last one of them. And I saw every last one of those in the theater as well. And, did I have the same feeling that I did when I left, the theater, after seeing, Thunderbolts? No, right? Because, no, they're not on the same level, but I still enjoyed them largely, right? Like, I can go in there and I can find things that I enjoy to be like, okay, no, I dig this, I dig that, because I was already going into the movie with an interest, right? Like, I didn't go in there expecting that the movie was going to piss me off. I went in there looking for how I was going to enjoy it. Like, what was I going to enjoy out of it? No, it wasn't going to be necessarily the greatest thing, but so many people just, it feels like they don't do that anymore, right? Like, if they ever did it at all. And so that's where, having that predisposition in terms of how you feel about a particular film before you see it, that's why you don't need test screenings. That's why you don't need to hear all this la la from Scuba Madness about how Fantastic Four looks, or how what other people's secondhand knowledge allegedly says it looks like, or the same with Superman, right? And all the other rumors about, well, the test screenings did not do well, so they've made these wholesale changes, which of course Heat Vision debunked the other day. Largely it's like, no, there have not been a massive amount of reshoots, and I still don't see how anybody can watch the trailers for Superman and see like the other stuff for it, like even the Sub-Saharan Prime clip, and go, oh well, clearly this movie was full of jokes, just like Guardians of the Galaxy, and he removed them at the last second because they didn't test well. Where do you get that? Like, do you really think that if that was how the movie was constructed, that there would be a scene like that Lois interrogation scene? I'm calling it the interrogation scene, but like she is grilling him for the first minute of that trailer, and it's like, that is there a scene like that, like with that type of tone and that type of, like, in any of the Guardians films? And I'm not saying there aren't emotional scenes and aren't like heavier scenes in the Guardians films, but you know what I'm talking about, tonally speaking, with respect to those movies. I don't even think there's a scene like that in the Suicide Squad, which I still to this day would hold up as James Gunn's best comic book film to date. I am prepared to change my mind on July 11th, and would kind of like to change my mind on July 11th, only because I think Superman, in my personal opinion, should be better than the Suicide Squad in that regard, subjectively speaking. But we'll see. We will see. I will try and be as fair about it as possible. But that's what I'm saying, is like, I don't see how you can like look at any of the, unless you really just want to hunt and peck and nitpick about James Gunn's style, and just, you just don't trust him whatsoever, and just like, all right, you know what, I'm gonna hold my nose as I watch this movie. Come on, really, like, if you have to go through that, then I would say don't watch it. I would, if that's what your expectations are, don't watch it. I believe, based on what I've seen of James Gunn and what he's said, and in interviews, and in just the attitude that he's taken, with his movies, and also with Peacemaker, I should point out as well, because the trailer for season 2 did come out, and there's been some behind the scenes clips for that. I think James Gunn is most certainly a student of the source material, and because of that, he is, very reverential to the source material at times. And if he's going to do characters like the Suicide Squad or Peacemaker or Creature Commandos, yeah, it's going to be a different tone than Superman. That's where, to me, it's just like, come on, guys, it's Superman, right? Like, Superman just, not that there's no humor, not that there's no, like, uh, comedy, like, not that there isn't anything in there for, like, like hilarity, and for, like, situational comedy and whatnot, but still, that character kind of by itself commands a different tone and a different level of, like, tonality and emotional, like, uh involvement, investment, there we go, emotional investment, than Suicide Squad or any of those other characters do, right? You're not going to treat that source material, you're not going to, that source material is different than all those other characters. That origin is different, right? We all know that origin, right? And remember, with respect to the legacy of Superman, right? It's not like Suicide Squad's brand new, like within the last decade, right? People like myself were first introduced to it through the 2016 film, right? And many of us still hoping to see the air cut at some point eventually. Who knows? We're probably on the Downer cut timeline for that, if it ever happens. Hopefully, fingers crossed. But that was our first introduction to the Suicide Squad, right? And so now the question is, okay, which one was better? The studio cut that was bastardized from Ayer's original vision, or Gunn's film? I would say Gunn's film, subjectively speaking, only because, I mean, big reason, because it was the film that he wanted to make, but it's new characters that we weren't completely initiated to, like, beforehand out of the comics. Same with Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Like, who were really fans of the Guardians of the Galaxy like that before 2014, before that first film, right? So when he's taking characters that are fresh to the general audience, it's one thing. He can do a lot of different things tonally with that. But when he's taking a character like Superman, who not only has been around for nearly 90 years, but also has a nearly 50-year history on the big and small screen, you have to take a different approach with that, because you're not just speaking to the comic fans who already have an idea from whatever run of Superman that they've latched onto, whether it's the Silver Age, whether it's John Byrne, whether it's Dan Jurgens, my personal favorite, whether it's Peter Tomasi, whether it's Brian Michael Bendis, whoever it is, right? Like, whatever comic run of Superman that, you latched onto, right? You're speaking to those people. You're also speaking to everybody that grew up with Superman the movie in 1978. You're speaking to the people that grew up, believe it or not, with Man of Steel in 2013, right? Like, that's their conception of it. And then there's all the people, like Amari brought up in Fight Chat the other day. There's the people that got into the television versions, like those who love Superman and Lois, Tyler Hoechlin's version on the Arrowverse, right? Or Dean Cain's version in Lois and Clark: The Adventures of Superman, right? Or Tom Welling in the 10 seasons of Smallville, right? You're speaking to all of these people. You're trying to make a Superman movie for the entirety of this audience. You're not going to get all of them, but you have to understand, you have to take that tact with the legacy of that character, which means you're not going to be able to do exactly the same things that you did with Suicide Squad. You're not going to be able to do exactly the same things that you did with Guardians of the Galaxy, because those are different legacies. And they don't have the same reach that Superman has had. Superman, we got generations of people who know who Superman is, whether they've read a comic or not, right? Can't say that about Guardians of the Galaxy or about the Suicide Squad. There's really one, maybe two generations. In fact, truthfully, we're talking about when they released, and if we're looking at all the generational parameters, it's really just Gen Alpha that has grown up knowing what the Suicide Squad really is in that regard. So there's a lot more freedom necessarily. And not to say that the Superman lore restricts James Gunn, it's just saying that for people who have questions about the tone, I do think that the legacy of the character means that he's got to take a different tact with it. And so far, that different tact that I'm talking about is evident, I think, in the trailer and in the spots that we have seen to this point, and also the behind the scenes stuff as well. I think it is quite evident in that regard. And so, yeah, knowing all of this, having all of this built up in your head, why do we need test screening numbers, and why do we need projections, right? Now what is this, whoever is, because I think that it's come out now, the budget estimated for this movie, 225 million, and it's like, okay, that's Man of Steel's budget. Well, I wonder where they got that number from. Whatever. It just, why does that matter? Because, well, we're trying to figure out what the break-even point is. I guess somebody already identified that the break-even point is $500 million. Whatever. I've already said that this movie does not need to make $1 billion, right? The $1 billion mark is still a mythical benchmark. It's even more of a mythical benchmark now. The people that are still using that as a guideline, they're out to lunch. And, Marvel fans are learning that, right? Because you got all the ones that are getting real defensive about Brave New World, real defensive about Thunderbolts, because they're underperforming by MCU standards. And now all the stuff that we told them about how DC movies didn't need to break $1 billion in order to be considered successful, now they're seeing that side of it. They're applying it to their movies, right? It was fine to trash DC movies when they weren't making $1 billion and Marvel movies were, but now that Marvel movies aren't, now box office doesn't matter. Now it's all about scoreboard mentality. Now, how come you guys care so much about numbers? It's because you motherfuckers cared so much about numbers back with DC movies. Oh my goodness. The second week drop off for Batman v Superman was historically awful. And look at the marketing budget. That movie cost $400 million and it didn't even break $1 billion with the two most popular superheroes in DC's cachet, and you couldn't even do that. It was all important then. Now nobody gives it. Now no one should care. No one should care that Thunderbolts is underperforming. No one should care that Brave New World is underperforming. All the shit that we told you before, now it's flipped. And now a lot of hypocrites. Whole lot of hypocrites out there with respect to that, And hey, it is what it is. Johnny come latelys. It's like, now you understand how we all felt years ago about just enjoying the movies regardless of how much money they make, because we are no longer at a point. We are not. We're no longer at a point. I don't care what anybody says. We're no longer at a point where superhero movies must do this in order to stay alive. No, the superhero genre is solvent. It's solvent so much to the point that people are pissing and moaning about how many of them there are. And yet, the next time there's a big team up, like Deadpool and Wolverine or Spider-Man No Way Home, right? And surely with the Avengers films, that's when the $1 billion come back. That's when the general audience and everybody comes back for the big event films. They're skipping Quantumania, yes. They're skipping the Marvels. They're skipping stuff like that. They're waiting for the big films from the MCU to come back to the theater because that's what they're willing to spend their money on. And the hope is they're going to do the same in July for Superman to kick off the DCU and for Fantastic Four First Steps because that's arguably the biggest project this year for the MCU, right? So here's the hope with respect to that. But yeah, all this, these box office projections, who gives a shit? Who cares? We want Superman to perform strongly, but we know that $1 billion is not necessary. It's not, right? And these break even numbers and all this shit that Forbes or anybody else is speculating, yeah, it's all that shit's for the birds. What it comes down to is whatever DC Studios deems a success. And we can look at it and we can go from a perception standpoint and say, all right, you make somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 750 million, especially if that budget is actually true. If it's 225 million, Man of Steel's budget, right? And with respect to it made what, 668 if I'm not mistaken, and that was enough to garner a sequel. That was enough to garner Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, right? You got to make more, significantly more, a couple hundred million more than what Thunderbolts or Brave New World has made, right? But it doesn't have to be $1 billion, right? It can be in a bit of a sweet spot there in that regard, right? So that's what it needs to be. But again, scoreboard watching. Like, the only reason that we're watching numbers for Superman is because it's the first film in the DCU and it needs to succeed in this case for that franchise to continue. But it's not like Superman movies are dead if it does, because here's what'll happen. What'll happen is, let's say, and I'm not rooting for this, hopefully this does not happen, but if Superman does not do well and, Zaslav in his infinite idiotic wisdom decides to pull the plug on the DCU and DC Studios, they're just going to remake Superman again. And, they're never going to stop doing that, right? Especially since we don't have nearly as many versions of him as we do Batman in the last 30, 40 years, right? So it's not like we're never going to see Superman on the big screen again if this one doesn't do well. No, we will. We most certainly will. But we're rooting for this one because we want to see this universe get off to a good start. So this is the one time where we actually are looking for financial success, financial viability for this film. Not for DC, not for superhero movies in general, because though that genre is solvent. Trust me on that. I mean, come on. Just look at the landscape and how many people are pissing and moaning about it on social media, right? So, it's all just in the middle, in the gray area with respect to perceptions and what everything is. And it's all noise at this point, man. And the noise is going to get louder. It's going to get louder, just like all the people that, the next time new pieces of marketing come out, surely someone's going to go, no, this is Superman. This is what we're talking about. Never mind all that dark gray murder versus Zack Snydery bullshit. That evil son of a bitch. I can't believe what he did to the kid. Never mind those idiots that you should just block and move on. And this is a personal appeal. And I realize that in some cases you could call me a hypocrite for saying this, but listen, all these morons that you guys keep finding on threads and social media that you're responding to, just block them. Just block them. That's what I'm doing. When I see you guys comment on them, especially you, John, when I see you guys comment on these morons' posts, I just block them, right? And maybe every once in a while, like there was that one dude who, he posted a gif of the, hey buddy, eyes up here, and was like, finally a comic accurate Superman. I screenshot his shit, blocked him, and then posted the screenshot and said, finally another broken ass gatekeeper, whatever I said, to block, right? Like that type of, and not that I don't have to look very far to find Superman gatekeepers to block. But my point is just block them. Don't give them air, don't give them oxygen, don't spread their bullshit, just block them. And I know I've been as guilty of it in the past as anybody else. I have. Most certainly I have. And as I get older, I realize, no. Silence their bullshit. Keep them in that dank, dark corner where they can just scream into the void with all the other assholes and all the other nerd MAGA pricks that just want to spout hatred and, toxicity and look for attention, right? And all the rage bots too, right? If they got 14 followers and no threads of their own and all they do is reply, and that's a bot. That's not a real, like, look at the pictures, like the videos of the bot farms, right? All the cell phones that are lined up in a row in like a server bank, right? And they're just there to piss you off. They're just there to stoke conversation. They're fake racists. They're digital racists. They're digital bigots. They're digital, like, shitsters and gatekeepers. Block their asses. Seriously, just put them off to the side and don't even... Look, do whatever you want. I mean, that's my personal appeal, to just block their asses. In the event that you don't and you keep responding to them, honestly, it's still helping me because I'm just going to block them myself because I don't need to see any of their toxicity on my feed ever in that regard, right? And I am doing my best not to respond to them and just block and move on. It's only going to get worse. You know it's only going to get worse between now and July 11th, and certainly after the movie comes out. If that movie gets strong reviews, and if we start seeing those headlines about Man of Steel who, Zack Snyder who, right? If we start seeing that shit, which many of us are prepared to see, yes, it's going to piss us off. Yes, it's going to be frustrating. Yes, it's going to be irritating. Block them. I don't care who it is. Block them. That's what I'm going to do. I don't care how verified, who they write for, or whatever. If they immediately go into the tribalism bullshit, blocked. Absolutely blocked. I have no quarter for that. None whatsoever. My patience has absolutely run out for that. There was a time where, all the people, mutuals and people on, my fellow, like compatriots on YouTube would talk about how you can't block everybody because then you just create an echo chamber. And screw that. Social media is a series of echo chambers. And right now we're in an era in human history, especially in the United States of America, where we need to protect our peace. And protecting my peace means getting rid of the assholes that I don't want to hear their bullshit from, right? So that's how I feel about that. That's where I stand with respect to that. So either way, block them, or if you must comment on them, then fine. You will raise you'll put an alarm, a little bell on them so that I know who to block in that regard, and I'll block them myself so that I don't ever need to see their bullshit ever again. But either way, just prepare because we are 1 month and a week away from July 11th, and yeah, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to ramp up. There's only going to be more people and more bots trying to piss you off with respect to this film. So just be prepared for that going forward. The only other thing I really wanted to talk about is the fact that Sinners is back in the conversation because today is the day that it released on digital. I am still waiting for my 4K Steelbook. That is going to come out in another month or so in July. I already have it reserved. Of course, I reserved it the day I saw the movie on the way home from seeing the movie, my first viewing, because I've seen it twice in theaters. The conversation continues to be lively surrounding this film. It's at 350.7 million worldwide as of right now. Numbers off of Box Office Mojo, and I can only imagine how the home theater numbers. And I'm very curious to see what the home release numbers are going to be, especially with physical media, because I keep seeing it sell out. I keep it Amazon and Zavvi and other sites are selling out of copies, right? With respect to pre-orders and reserves, right? And mine better not get back ordered. They better send my shit on time when they told me it's going to be sent, right? In July. But either way, one thing that I did want to touch on, I got into some conversations on Threads, and seeing this sentiment, for and against the idea of there being any sequels, prequels, or spin-offs to Sinners. Now, for the record, before anybody starts off with this, okay, because this was not the point of why I was saying anything on Threads, but I'll just go ahead and get this out of the way. Yes, Ryan Coogler has said on multiple occasions that, one, not only was he not thinking of doing sequels or turning Sinners into a franchise as he was filming the movie, because he'd already been involved with Marvel, and he's done 2 Black Panther films. He's involved with that franchise. He's going to do the third one, in theory, right? We've heard whispers about that, right? Like, so not only wasn't he thinking about it with Sinners as he was making it, but he is allegedly not thinking about it now, even in the wake of the success that it has had for Warner Brothers, domestically mostly. This is a hell of a split too. 76.3% domestic, 23.7% international. But somebody was saying on Threads that that didn't seem right. What was going on with the international release? And to be honest with you, this is a Black America movie. It is, and it's one of those where like international audiences. It doesn't surprise me that it doesn't play quite as well overseas as it does here, because Black America showed up for this movie. Black America absolutely showed up for this movie, and so did allies, white America and others who definitely appreciate the horror aspect and certainly appreciate the subject matter of the film. Yes, most certainly American audiences, because this movie Sinners is steeped in American history, right? Black history is American history. It's steeped in that. So the idea that it would do that much better, like 3/4 of its gross was here as opposed to overseas, totally get it. Absolutely get it. I don't think there's anything weird about that at all because of the subject matter. But with respect to the idea of it being a franchise, yes, Ryan Coogler has said he's not interested in doing that. Wanted to do standalone. Okay, fine. That wasn't my point. Here's my point. My point is, I don't like people that are on either side of the discussion with respect to whether it should be franchised or whether it shouldn't be franchised. And there's two particular things that piss me off, truthfully, that irritate me, I should say, that frustrate me. I mean, there are the people who, like, and this happens with any filmmaker, any like not indie filmmakers for sure, but filmmakers that haven't necessarily done big franchise stuff. And Coogler, I know he's done Creed and he's done two Marvel movies. I get it. So he's kind of like, in some ways, he should be exempt from this, but he's not. But like, when Sinners did well, what are people still saying? I should give him Blade. He should do the Blade movie because they really want to see a Blade movie and they think he would do a great job of it. The same thing happened with Jordan Peele. They attached Jordan Peele to Blade and Cyborg and a bunch of once Get Out did well, or when like Us or Nope, right? Like any black director does well, it's like, well, they should do this black character movie, they should do that movie, and again, they do this for other directors as well, right? Like there are people who think Ari Aster should do a Marvel movie. There are people who think Alex Garland should do a Marvel movie. That type of right. I don't know who, but I guarantee that that's a discussion that has been had in that regard, right? So there's that is kind of irritating because it's like, well, okay, they can do whatever they want, right? Then Coogler is going to go in whatever direction he wants to take his career, Ryan Coogler, right? So that's, respect his wishes with respect to that. He doesn't need to do Blade. Marvel doesn't need to give him Blade. He's already got Black Panther. So, that's where your own selfishness is coming into play because you want to see a Blade movie and you think he should do the Blade movie for you in that regard, right? But the other side of that coin are the people that are just so staunchly against the idea of Sinners being franchised. They're like, no, don't water it down. Don't ruin the original film. We want more original stuff. Let the man cook. We want to eat more original ideas. And this is what doesn't make sense about that because apparently there's this idea that once like you make a spin-off or a sequel or a prequel to Sinners that now all of a sudden it's no longer an original film. I didn't realize that sequels, spin-offs, and prequels turned an original film not original. That's a weird one. I don't know how does that logistically work in that regard. No, what it does, the only thing that it changes is it turns an original film into an original franchise. That's what Star Wars was in 1977. It was an original film, and then in 1980 it became an original franchise when The Empire Strikes Back came out. Now, almost 50 years later, it's a massive franchise, and there have been multiple directors, there have been multiple creatives, there's been multiple shows. Now it's a huge IP, right? Like it's a big, gigantic IP that George Lucas totally was able to sell for $4.4 billion in 2012 to Disney, right? Like that's how that works, okay? And to me, all the people that are worried about, well, he shouldn't do that with Sinners because Sinners was such a transcendent experience and it needs to stand alone. He needs to do other, art house stuff. You're just as selfish as the people that want to do Blade. Because why would you say, and this is what you're saying, whether you mean to say this or not, you're basically saying, well, a black man, he shouldn't be allowed to franchise. That's what you're saying. And, people may think that I'm harsh with that. I don't think I am. Because why is it okay for George Lucas to do it? Not only with Star Wars, but then also him and Spielberg with Indiana Jones. At one point, that was an original film. Raiders of the Lost Ark was an original film in 1981, and then it became a franchise once Temple of Doom was released, and then we had Last Crusade 5 years after that, right? Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, however you feel about it, Dial of Destiny, however you feel about that, right? That turned into a franchise, an original franchise that they were able to profit off of and sell. If Sinners actually did expand, then that Ryan Coogler's franchise would be building, right? He would be a black creative, a black filmmaker, an executive producer that would actually be able to build his own original franchise. And how often do we see that? How often does that get to be the case? And this is what you don't want. This is what you're so vehemently against. This is what you think is such a horrible idea. Look, at the end of the day, I want Ryan Coogler to do what Ryan Coogler wants to do. It's his franchise. It's his movie. He can do whatever he wants. If he doesn't want to do sequels, if he doesn't want to do spinoffs, if he doesn't want to do prequels, that's his business. Okay, cool. I'm fine with that. If he wants to do it, like if he ever changes his mind or ever decides, hey, so-and-so, this director that's up and coming, I'm going to let him do a prequel here and I'm going to executive produce or I'm going to let him do a show or whatever it is, right? There shouldn't be anything wrong with that. Why are we so worried about that? I see all this sentiment on social media because again, like I was saying earlier, people are caterwauling and complaining about Marvel movies and superhero films, and it's like you just think that any sequel, any franchise just immediately becomes the next Marvel or the next DC. It doesn't work that way with an original IP like Sinners. It does not work that way. Sinners doesn't automatically become Star Wars or Marvel or DC because of one sequel or because of a prequel or because of a spin-off. That's not how this works. It starts as an original IP that turns into an original franchise, right? If they were to expand it. And then from that point, Coogler, especially when the rights revert back to him in 25 years, can do whatever he wants and profit off that. He can do the George Lucas and say, hey, I'm going to sell my Sinners franchise to Universal or to uh, whoever, right? Whatever it is, somebody outside of Warner Brothers, whoever, Netflix, whoever he wants, right? And I know the theatrical people like, oh, don't even joke about that. Yes, I get it. Everything is so sacrilegious, but it's really these extremes are just rooted in fan selfishness. And again, that's both the people who want Ryan Coogler to direct Blade and desperately want him to direct Blade, or some other big IP that they think he as a black director can tackle, and the people who think it's just the worst idea in the world for him to even remotely do any type of expansion to Sinners. I think both of those extremes come from the same fan selfishness. You don't care about Ryan Coogler as the creative, you only care about what you want to see. You only go as far as what he gives you to enjoy. And you had a transcendent experience with Sinners, and you want that to continue with other original ideas that are outside of the Sinners world instead of expounding upon a movie that you already had a transcendent experience with because you have decided that if anything spins off of that, that it's going to weaken it for you. But not everybody, right? Because it's all subjective. It doesn't apply to everyone. It's not an objective rule by any stretch of the imagination. And I am not demanding that he do any type of expansion whatsoever. If he never expands on Sinners, if he never does any prequels, never does any sequels, never does any spin-offs, great. That's awesome. I'm still going to own the damn movie. It's still going to be an incredible piece of cinema. And to this date, still the best movie of the year, right? And I will hope that it, like anybody else, hope that it, lives on and transcends into award season, even though it's totally outside of award season for when it would normally get nominated, right? But you hope that it lives on to that. We're all looking for that, hopefully, right? It doesn't matter. But if he did decide to franchise at any point, and he's not now, I get it. He's not now. So don't give me this shit about why you're even talking about this, Ray. It's a moot point. No, I'm not talking about what his decision is. I'm talking about everybody else's reaction. Because as I've made it clear a lot of times when I talk about this stuff, when I rant about things, I'm usually not ranting about the creatives. Because I believe in creative freedom. I believe in giving the creative the benefit of the doubt in terms of the story that they want to tell and in terms of the direction that they want to take the material that they're working with, especially if it's an original IP. But when I complain, when I rant, when I talk about shit that frustrates me, it's because of fan behavior. Fans suck. We know this. Fans absolutely suck. Fandoms have horrible people in them. Not everybody, and not even the majority, but there are a lot of stupid people. There are a lot of selfish people, and there are a lot of gatekeepers, and there are a lot of people who are elitist who want to get on social media and spout their nonsense and act like their way is the way. Their way is the right way. No, it's not. And that's what frustrates me. The people that want to say one way or the other that Sinners either must be expanded or should never be expanded. Screw you. It's not your decision. It's Ryan Coogler's decision, and probably Warner Brothers if they decide to do something with it beforehand. But the only reason I think they would be hesitant to do that is because anything that they do to expand Sinners will just revert back to Ryan Coogler in 25 years anyway. So, do those studio heads, does David Zaslav really want to do that for a black filmmaker? I have my doubts. I do. I have my doubts. So, while there are people out there that are convinced that Warner Brothers is going to try and run Sinners into the ground because of how well it succeeded, I don't know if that's going to be the case simply because of the deal that Coogler got, where anything that they build out of that franchise is going to go right back to him in 25 years, and it will be his rights, it'll be his money, it'll be his original franchise to cash in on should they build it out. So either way, my issue is not with Coogler and his decision making. If he is saying he doesn't want to do it, and all indications are that he doesn't want to, fine. I have no issues with that whatsoever. I 1000% respect that decision. What I don't respect are the people who are so vehemently against the idea because they think it would sully their incredible experience. That's your fault. That's absolutely 100% your fault if any prequel or any sequel or any spin-off ruins the experience of the original Sinners movie for you, if that were to happen. That's completely your fault, not anybody else's. You were making that conscious choice subjectively to feel that way. Blame no one but yourself. Look in the mirror, point right back at it, and that is who is at fault with respect to that. Not Coogler, not Warner Brothers, not anybody else, should that happen. And in the event that it doesn't happen, the people that would be upset that Ryan Coogler doesn't expand it, or upset that he doesn't do Blade, or upset that he doesn't do Cyborg or whatever else, it's also your fault to be disappointed, because Ryan Coogler can do whatever he wants. Ryan Coogler can direct whatever films, write whatever films, make whatever films he wants as far as his career is concerned. He has earned that particular respect, I think, as a filmmaker, whether he did Sinners or Fruitvale Station or Black Panther or whatever. He's earned that right as a filmmaker, as a creative, to be able to make his own choices in his career, right? We're just the audience. We don't dictate what he gets to do with his career. And I see so many fans try to do that on social media, and screw that. These creatives should be allowed their freedom, should be allowed their latitude to go wherever they want to take their career, regardless of how we feel. Because we control our own feelings, not them. We control how we feel about this stuff. And we need to grow the hell up and take way more inventory in our own feelings and way more accountability in our own feelings for any of these decisions that get made with respect to what is going on. So, just wanted to rant a little bit about that, because, man, fan behavior, I tell you what, it just never ceases to get the blood boiling, never ceases to raise that blood pressure, does it? Nope, not at all. But, I think that's going to do it for this particular episode of the Flightcast. Thank you so much for listening to my rantings and my ravings and my thoughts with respect to Superman, Sinners, and everything else going on under the sun. If you have any thoughts on anything that I talked about here with respect to Superman and DC Studios and the whole, comic book shared cinematic universe era and whatnot, and what to look forward to and how to deal with fans and all that. And if you have any thoughts on the whole Sinners discussion as well with respect to, whether you agree or disagree with me with respect to the whole point about whether it gets expanded or not, you know where to find me on Threads and Instagram at the Flightcast, on BLUESKY at Flightcast. You can comment on the Flightcast YouTube page on the posting right underneath this episode. There's also the Flightcast Facebook page, and of course that can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care, stay safe out there, have a great rest of the week, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.